Have the 49ers ruined Trey Lance by not playing him? I mean, this is a guy who was like the least experienced quarterback ever to go in the top, 15 picks, and he hasn't played much in the last 2 years. I mean, what is the stat? How many games has he played in the last?
9 out of a possible 44 games over the last 3 seasons.
I mean, he's still only 22 years old, but did his development hinge on him getting a lot of playing time early? And did the Niners mess that up, or can this be salvaged here?
Well, I don't know if they messed it up or if his injuries messed it up. I mean, how much do you blame the Niners for his injuries, so on and so forth, or their development curve? I would say this. I would say to date, they haven't screwed him up. But if he sits going forward for the next 2 years, I don't think he's going to have the same NFL career. You have to play. You can't just sit out 5 years. I mean, it's just not. You just can't do it. Nobody does it. Nobody has done it. Nobody will do it. You got to be able to play. You got to play. You got to develop while you play. So I don't think they've ruined him to this point. I think he will be ruined, though, if he sits for 2 more years.
I just don't understand taking a guy who is short on playing time and experience and making the plan, let's not play him. To me, I think him working out hinged on him getting playing time and closing that rep gap. And maybe they still could. He's younger than Brock Purdy, and he's on a really good team. Like, he's in some good circumstances. But I'm looking at all the successful quarterbacks in the league right now. These are guys, all of them, except for a couple, threw about at least 900 passes in college, including junior college if they went there. Like, trying to get a guy up to speed who threw 300 passes in college, it's hard. And usually those are guys that go in round 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 because they haven't revealed very much about. You haven't seen very much. You know, you haven't seen the full Monty. You've maybe seen a little bit, and the rest is a projection. So I'm not saying that Trey Lance won't work out, but man, the Niners seem like they've put him in a position where the odds are against him.
I just think they made their decision, I think, in a vacuum, and they said, we want the highest end potential, and they looked for it and took it. And then they said, oh, we'll take the highest end potential, and then we'll just put them through what we think is the best development curve, which is sit for a year like Mahomes did, and then we'll just have an awesome quarterback. Well, it just doesn't work that way. And what really is amusing is the Niner fans who just feel like Trey, next year is going to be totally different than Trey this year. Maybe, but that's not based on anything other than hope. We're all hoping he improves, but to just expect that, like, oh yeah, he'll play next year, he'll be the starter, and they'll win a bunch. Why? Because you said so? Because you want it? Because you like Trey and you like the idea of Trey's upside? Yeah, we all do. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, and it hasn't happened to this point. And Shanahan is telling you how raw he thinks he is by how he utilized him. And suddenly he's going to he's going to have every nuance of the position totally nailed down. He's going to beat out Brock Purdy next year in camp. And, maybe.
But I think with 49ers fans that like Trey Lance still, even though like there's some of them that still like Trey Lance, what they don't understand is, how do you draft a guy who had 300 whatever throws in college? You didn't discover that he was raw. You didn't bring him into camp and be like, hey, John, this quarterback that we got, he's kind of raw. Like, that was the book on him. You knew that. The whole thing of taking him was that you had a plan. Your plan was going to work. And it seems like the Niners basically didn't ever do the project. They took on the project. They didn't do the project. They put off the project. They broke the project. And now they're trying to salvage the project in year 3 or not. I mean, we'll see. Maybe Brock Purdy comes back and they never actually get to the project of Trey Lance, in which case he could go to another team at 24 and try again. But it seems like the Niners may actually be ruining his career if he had a chance. I don't know. This may set him back. I feel kind of bad for him. I mean, he was always walking the tightrope of a lot of projection, not a lot of experience, go on a good team and make it happen. We thought the Niners were that team, but he needed a year and they were unwilling to give him a week. That's the story of Trey Lance on the 49ers. He needed a year. They were unwilling to give him a week. And now what do they got? I don't know.
But, here's the thing about this. we can put it on the Niners because they ultimately make the decisions, but nobody was willing to be patient. Nobody. And people who said they are lying. They weren't.
Well, the Bills were
Nobody's
willing to
willing.
be patient with Josh Allen, and it worked out for them.
Players weren't going to be patient.
And that's why the Niners
were going to demand for.
But that's why the
they're gonna
Niners
demand
bear
Jimmy.
responsibility for drafting him. Like, you knew he took time. You knew it was a project. You knew that he needed a year. And you couldn't, I guess they thought they could do it on the bench. Well, they lied to themselves about that. The timelines never matched up. And so I feel like for Trey to work out, he needed a team that took more of the Buffalo approach, not the San Francisco approach. And maybe he still work out. I'm not writing him off. I feel like you might be. I'm not writing him off.
I'm not writing him off, but I mean, I did an interview with a former NFL GM who told me he wouldn't have even had him on their board because he didn't play enough in college.
Right.
And that he just wasn't draftable.
It was a controversial pick. Absolutely.
That it was all based on projection.
But then again, so was Justin Fields, so was Mac Jones, so was Zach Wilson. You look at all four of those guys, I mean, they threw like 650 passes in college. Now, Trey threw a little bit less than that, but still, they're all projections. And so far, none of them worked out except for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fields has shown the most positive of those guys, but then that's this year. Last year, Mac Jones looked pretty good, or 2 years ago, I should say. Mac Jones looked pretty good. I think if you asked Shanahan who he wanted, if of any of them, he probably would have taken Lawrence 1, but I bet you would have taken Zach Wilson 2. And Zach Wilson's like persona non grata with the Jets, but they're not trading him. They're going to try to develop him.
I bet you Kyle would have taken Zach Wilson 1. Him and Chris Sims. Chris Sims freaking loved Zach Wilson, and Kyle seems, I don't know what that was, but yeah, that was a mistake.
I loved him too. I mean, I thought he was mad. I thought he had great skills, but you know what's hard is that in college at BYU. He never had to make plays with bodies flying around him.
No.
And there was like, you could park a car between his O-line and the D-line. And
he had one great year. Only had one great year, and he only threw like 800 passes in college. I mean, there were a lot of red flags there.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL is all about playing within in a muddy pocket with all kinds of guys. Action. If that's going to bother you to the point where you become, unglued, this ain't the right.
And that's why Ohio State quarterbacks have never worked out, because they don't ever experience that at Ohio State. They just have all the time in the world. Whereas at Alabama, it's the SEC. There is some muddy pockets for sure.
Some muddy pockets. I mean, Fields looks pretty good, but he also has taken a ton of sacks and he holds the ball a ton.
Yeah,
but at times,
great athlete,
incredible. I mean, he's had some incredible games,
but he looks like he has no idea what he's doing as a passer. No idea. He's just doing hero ball out there.
I'm not.
The timing is gone. There's
no anti-Trey, but I'll say this. I came into it pro Trey, but I'll know a lot more when I see him this summer or this spring. When I see him on the field this summer, I'll have a better idea of how much he's improved. But I didn't see tons of improvement from year 1 to year 2. He had some great, we were there together. He had some incredible practices, but he also had practices where he was throwing what need to be layups. He's airmailing that pass by 7, 8 feet, 9 feet. I mean, that's that. So I don't know what to say. And I'll say this, the fans are never going to show patience, and the locker room isn't, and Kyle isn't. So I don't know if Trey's their guy, to be honest, because I don't see any of the key figures being willing to endure the pain that will come with the development curve of a quarterback that is inexperienced.
Yeah, but here's what the situation is different. Jimmy's gone. Brock's the guy, but he's hurt. So either Brock will be ready. If Brock's ready for the beginning of the season, it's Brock's job. But also, there's the fact that the Niners haven't kept a quarterback healthy for more than like 8 games since 2019. So either Brock starts the season and most likely gets hurt at some point and Trey Lance gets his opportunity, or Brock's not ready and Trey starts the season. Most likely, both of these guys are going to play at some point next season, and Trey will get at least one more chance to show what he's made of, and we'll see. He's got four games under his belt. We'll see. If he hasn't improved at all since last season, and he still has the same mechanical issues, and he's still sailing passes high, that's a huge problem, and it's probably time to start talking about him not improving. But we're not there yet. We'll see.
He's had 4 games under his belt, you said. It's really not even 4, right? Because it was Arizona, Houston, and the first game this year. So it's really more like 3. He's
Right.
really played 3 games.
And they
in
were
those
all
3
spread
games-
out.
But the only thing I'll say is Brock had the same disadvantages that Trey had, even more so because he didn't even know he was going to play. He stepped right in and won games.
Sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything about the future. Doesn't mean anything necessarily about the future. It does mean that Brock has had a tremendously impressive start to his career. But one thing I'd like to say about Trey is it would have been interesting if he could have played the next week after Houston against the Rams and could have kept going, because the offense was clicking at that point. The offense had an identity. Everyone was healthy. They were playing well, and he could fit in, kind of like what Brock did at the end of the season. The other times he's played at the beginning of the season when people have been hurt and they haven't had an identity. So I'm not saying he would have beaten the Rams, but I'm not saying he wouldn't have. It would have been interesting. We'll never know. I still think Trey's going to get another opportunity, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do. The Niners have really had to develop him on the bench through injuries. And you know what? Some teams have been able to do it, right? McCarthy did it with Rodgers. Reed did it with Mahomes. Let's see if Kyle can do it with Lance. We'll see.
Let me ask you a question. What
Sure.
is better for the 49ers? Because I think most people would look at Lance and say, man, he's got higher level athleticism, higher level arm strength. He has a better, he's got a more powerful engine if they were race cars. And that Purdy is ready to play right now, but long term, he may not have a high ceiling.
Well, Steve Young brought this up on KNBR, and it's a fair point. I mean, Brock Purdy's a hell of a story and a good quarterback, but is he great enough to win a Super Bowl? I mean, look at the guys that are left, right? It's Joe Burrow every year, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. Obviously, Brock Purdy isn't in their realm physically. So if he's better than Jimmy but not quite good enough, we need to know. If that's the whole reason the Niners went after Trey, is they felt he had a chance to be that good. Doesn't mean he will be, but that's the whole point. So I think in that case, especially now that both guys are hurt, maybe stick with both and see what happens. Because you've only gotten this much. What do you got? 8 games with one guy, 4 games with another? Who the hell knows? Seriously.
I'll say this. My one feeling that has changed about the Niner quarterback room has to do with neither of them, but the final spot. I think we learned a very painful lesson collectively, is that everybody on your team that is named quarterback has to be able to win. You have to be able to win, or at least run your offense through every quarterback on your roster.
And I think you need 3 guys up for a game until the Niners show that they can protect their quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And then a guy on practice squad too.
Yeah. But I mean, I no more, oh, it's a nice story, he's a local kid and this, and I'm not bashing Josh.
It's not Johnson's fault. It's not his fault.
Not his fault.
No.
And I like Josh. I think the world of Josh.
We all love Josh.
Yeah,
Yep.
seriously. Very good dude. And
They put you in a bad spot, man.
They put him in a bad spot. But no more quarterbacks that are there for any other reason other than you can win a game with them. If you can't win a game with them,
no coaches in the room. No coaches in the meeting room. None of that.
Right.
I'm with you on that. I'm with
you. He's there because of the no. If you can't win a game with him, he can't be on the roster.
So last thing I want to say about Trey,
I like
we're
the
going to
rookie
move on.
quarterbacks in this draft.
Yeah.
So I'd even consider going. I like the idea of the cheap room, and I would even go with a rookie quarterback, even though Brock's unproven, Trey's unproven, and obviously the rookie would be unproven. I would still go with the super cheap rookie quarterback room and spread that money to the other roster spots.
Last thing I want to say about Trey before we move on. The original question was, did they ruin him by not playing him? The way I look at it is, if you look at the successful quarterbacks in the league, most of them had a lot of experience in college. Now, that doesn't mean every experienced college quarterback is good in the NFL, but of the talented ones, usually it takes talent and experience to make it in the NFL. Trey was going to be the exception. And if you're going for the exception, I feel like you're kind of trying to shoot the moon in hearts. Everything has to go your way. You got to do it right. And obviously the Niners haven't so far. So part of it is on him. Part of it is on them. And I wonder if they can salvage this 3 years in. Because again, another thing that's key with these young quarterbacks is you want to take advantage of the rookie contract. You want to get the development done immediately. You want to get him on the field as soon as possible because he's cheap. He's cheaper than a quarterback on the market, a starting quarterback on the market. And they've wasted all of that time too. So something to keep in mind when we watch Trey Lance's story unfold the next 2 years.